Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
My friends, states, including Minnesota and Illinois, are trying to use constitutional and federalism language to stop or to reshape or to change immigration enforcement that they oppose, even though immigration enforcement is a responsibility of the federal government. And they're doing so through lawsuits that attack the methods, the motives, and the, judicial or jurisdictional friction that they create, rather than simply relying upon what is traditionally known as the federal power and the authority given to the federal government here to enforce such laws. So I want to talk about this today because there's been two lawsuits, Minnesota and Illinois, that have filed these to try to stop ICE under the guise of federalism. For the first time ever, the left seems concerned about federalism. And I'm going to walk through this because this matters a lot, my friends. And so that's the direction we're headed today. Welcome to the program. It's good to have you here. If you've not done so, I encourage you to sign up for our free email newsletter called The Inner Circle. ToddHuffShow.com is where you can do that. We elaborate on some of these things that we discuss here. We summarize it. There's some additional kind of behind-the-scenes stuff, just additional content. And I've grown to really love doing the newsletter, and we're going to be doing some more things with it as time comes along as well. So I ask you to take a look at that. And you know what? If you're a subscriber, you can share that newsletter. That helps us reach more people with the message, the conservative, not bitter message, helping others, I should say, hear and receive truth. My goodness, this nation is in major need of truth being proclaimed from the mountaintops on every street corner in every city in Minnesota, certainly Tim Walz's state, certainly Governor Pritzker's state. We need to proclaim it everywhere. That, of course, helps us do that, my friends. All right, so have you ever noticed how some families seem to have a plan that lasts for generations? It's not by accident, my friends. Full Suite Wealth works with people who want their wealth to make a difference for years to come. Their team brings together high-level investment strategies like private equity, private credit, option strategies, all coupled with expert legal advice. It's about making sure your vision becomes a reality for the people you love today and tomorrow. If you're looking to do more than just manage your money, if you want to leave a mark and build something lasting, take a look at Full Suite Wealth. FullSuiteWealth.com is the website. Again, FullSuiteWealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. All right, let's get into it here today. My friends, I mentioned that two states, Illinois and Minnesota, have filed lawsuits that are designed to basically interrupt, stop, or change the ICE operations in their cities. And here's the argument that they appear to be making. Understand, I'm not an attorney. I'm just a guy with common sense who's studied these things. I studied these things, of course, in college. But you know what? That doesn't even matter. I don't want to get off on this side tangent here, but I remember listening to some of the things that Charlie Kirk would debate with people in attendance, right? Some of these students. And some of these students would take to the microphone and basically call him stupid because he didn't have a college degree. You know what's stupid? Stupid is thinking someone's intelligence is predicated upon whether or not they have a college degree, whether or not they have a master's degree or a PhD. I've shared on this program before, and this comes at the risk of maybe stepping on some of your toes. I don't mean it. In fact, if you're in this audience, if you have an advanced degree, you are more than likely not in the group I'm discussing. So I want to make that clear because you're obviously engaged and thoughtful and looking to understand what's happening, and you're constantly consuming information, whether it comes with a degree attached to it or not. A lot of people seek a degree, and then they'll send you an email or whatever, and it's got all these letters at the end. I know some people, you've worked for that, whatever. I'm not here to minimize that. But I think some people look at that as a shield to say, look at me, look at how smart I am. I actually think this is radical in 2026. But I think if you want to know the intelligence of someone, you should base it upon the things that they believe and think, the way that they articulate those beliefs, the way that they can handle opposing ideas. There's a radical idea. Someone once said that one of the signs of being an adult is being able to entertain an idea without accepting it. I don't know how many people, I don't think there's a single person on the left that's capable of that. My dad, by the way, was, he worked in the union, retired from ultimately Rolls-Royce, but it was Allison's for a long time here in central Indiana. He was in the union. He ended up being a union representative, but he used to talk about a group of people that he would deal with in some of these meetings, and he would call them overeducated idiots. I've used that term before on this program to describe the people who have educated all the sense out of themselves. And there is certainly, and not everybody, there are people who know how to balance that. They know how to learn the information in a formal setting, go through the doctoral process or the master's program, and use that in practical ways, and not just create this mindset that is basically outside of the world of reality. And that's what happens a lot of times with these leftists. And that's to some degree, I think, what's happening here. So the left is attacking ICE, attacking the Trump administration for enforcing immigration law. And the first thing is they're saying, look, we want to attack these warrantless searches or these warrantless operations where there's no probable cause. So this is how they're framing it. This is how I'm trying to be as fair as I know how to be here. By the way, I think this is absolutely insane, and I'll get to why as we get through this program. These lawsuits are, I think, delusional for lots of reasons, but they're framing it like this. They want to say that. Now, I don't think that this is true. This is the headline. This is the argument. This is the position that they can hide their real intentions behind. But I think what they're trying to say here is, look, this isn't about whether the federal government can enforce immigration law. It's about how they're doing it. That is what they're going to hide behind. Make no mistake. That is a smokescreen. That is a ruse. That is a distraction. That is not something that's predicated and based in reality. It's not. It's not at all. In fact, the left is so upset about illegal immigration enforcement, border security, because it was their pipeline to votes, their pipeline to support, their pipeline to remaking this nation fundamentally and culturally something different. I'm telling you, the left they hate this nation as founded. They hate the Constitution. They hate the Declaration of Independence. They really hate the Declaration of Independence. You know, the Declaration of Independence cites God 4 times. They don't like that. They don't like the idea. I'm talking about the godless radical left. I'm not talking about every Democrat, not even every liberal. That's not at all what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about specifically the radical left. And it is a godless worldview, a morally bankrupt, godless worldview. And so this is how they seek to get votes. This is how they seek to fundamentally change America. You bring a bunch of people in. It doesn't matter their race. It doesn't matter their background. It doesn't matter where they're from. They just don't want people assimilated into the constitutional framework, the culture that was created, Western civilization, all that stuff in this nation. They don't like it. They don't like that it's being built upon or has a root and foundation in Christian or Judeo-Christian values and beliefs. They don't want that. But they're going to hide behind some other form of the argument to admit having to say that outright. So they're saying, look, we're not saying they can't enforce, the federal government cannot enforce federal law. What we're saying is they can't do it this way. They say agents are doing stops and making arrests, detaining people in ways that appear to be, or that look like there's no judicial warrant that's shown. There's a weak individualized suspicion of a person who they have stopped on the streets or whatever. They say some of these broad sweeps catch citizens, I should say, and residents who are lawfully here. By the way, listen, if there's an instance where an American citizen or someone who's maybe not a citizen but who has the legal right to be here, if there's an instance of that, of one of those folks being swept up in this and deported or something, I want to know. And do not come at me with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, if that's his name, the guy who's not a legal citizen of this country. I don't want to hear that. If that's your best example, then you don't have an example, because that's not what happened with him. But if that does happen, then obviously that needs to be rectified and fixed. That's obviously not the outcome that anybody's looking for. And if someone's looking for that outcome, then they're not on the side I'm on. We want the people who believe in immigration's enforcement. We want people who are not supposed to be here legally to not be here at all, and to go through the legal process. I mean, some of them should have to, some of them should give up, forfeit, that's the word I'm looking for, forfeit that right, I guess. It's not a right, but forfeit that privilege because they broke the law to come here. Maybe all of them should. Maybe there should be, I don't know what the details are, but we don't want people here illegally. That should come without saying. And if someone's here legally, then that's totally fine. Now, there could be another discussion on what should the United States policies look like regarding legal immigration. That can be a discussion, certainly, but that's not this one. That's not this one. And so these states, Illinois, Minnesota, they say that the government is doing these things. They're using pressure tactics around these sensitive areas like homes and workplaces and public areas and schools. And this is apparently, I guess, some other dangerous way of enforcing the law. You know, it's so interesting to me. It's so interesting. If they thought, let's go back to COVID. If they thought you were violating, and this wasn't even law, by the way, because this was just decrees by governors and everything else, but if they thought you were violating COVID mask policies or social distancing policies, or if they thought you were working in a place that was not essential, which, by the way, back in those days, I remember saying on this program that if it's my job that provides for my family, it's absolutely essential. Who are they to tell you what's essential? We got to reject all of these basic premises that we have accepted over the course of time that are at odds with liberty and the Constitution. But friends, there would have been no stone unturned. There would have been nothing, no violation of your Fourth Amendment protection to be secure in your person and papers and all that sort of stuff, to not have the government come in and warrantless search your business or whatever. There were people that didn't care. HIPAA didn't matter. I'm not saying HIPAA is constitutional, but you go from a society where you can't ask for someone's health records or whatever, to a situation where everybody who's a leftist is asking you, were you vaccinated? Have you had COVID? How many boosters have you had? We went to that world. They totally didn't care about any of our constitutional rights. Then now suddenly they care about where the law is enforced. Notice, by the way, the law is being enforced. The law is absolutely being enforced. And that's perhaps the most shocking thing. That's the thing that troubles these folks the most. The law is enforced, which means that the people that they have opened this country up to, who have come here illegally, who are importing their culture instead of assimilating to the American way of life and so forth, This helps the leftists in their cause. The law is being enforced. That's what's being done. And it's shocking to some people because it's been ignored for so long. The problem has been allowed to metastasize. It is a overwhelming problem in the vast majority of America's cities. Dare I say, maybe all of them. This is a problem. It's even a problem in other parts of the country, but absolutely within the cities. And now the states are having a problem with where this law is being enforced. You've heard examples, hotels not letting ICE agents check in. That was part of a nationwide brand. I don't want to say the one that I think it was, although I think I'm remembering which one it was. And I think they got kicked out. A particular hotel got booted from a network of hotels because of that, because they weren't allowing ICE agents to stay at their property. You have people, as we've seen with the recent tragedy, that are blocking ICE agents with their cars. I don't know if you've seen this. I've had this in my stack of stuff. I don't know if it's actually on the website today, but I've had it in the list of things I want to discuss. They've apparently created a device that you can place on tires of ICE vehicles that's designed to basically let all the air out of the tires so that they can't continue with an operation until, of course, they air up their tires and so forth. These are the sorts of things that are happening. Not only that, I mean, my goodness, let me just give you a sampling of some of the headlines that I've got here. Again, I don't know if these things all made the stack of stuff or if these are just things I was reading. Today's Todd Talk was about Ilhan Omar. Now, this is not directly related, but you could say it's tied to immigration and what's happening with some of the fraud. Ilhan Omar says that Trump pausing payments to Minnesota's Medicaid programs because of the $9 billion plus that have been allegedly or suspected to be fraudulently stolen. She says he's only doing that for PR purposes. We have the ICE agent who was involved in this shooting in Minneapolis. He's reportedly in hiding. We've got Trump out there making a pledge that he's going to uncover the leftist groups that are counter, I don't want to say protesting, but who are obstructing ICE. We've got leftist agitators, townhall.com, that have stalked and threatened to kill a journalist who's covering unrest in Minneapolis. Headline here at Town Hall, Minneapolis radicals begin distributing, devices to disable ICE vehicles. That's that device I was telling you about. Then you've got Trump administration. Trump says, look, Kristi Noem says we're sending hundreds more of federal agents to Minneapolis. We're not going to put up with the stuff that's going on here. There's an article here at PJ Media that says CNN doesn't want you to presume the ICE agent's innocence. My goodness, this goes on and on and on. My friends, it's chaos is what we've got here. And the left has orchestrated this. The left has stirred this up. The left, and it's some politicians. It's not all of them, but it's some politicians. It's a lot of these professional agitators, these folks who hate America. So let's get back to this lawsuit, though. Fourth Amendment, it applies to law enforcement. That includes federal agents, even though some people will tell you that ICE isn't law enforcement. It is law enforcement. The enforcement of law as it pertains to legal status here in the United States. But the Fourth Amendment applies to federal agents regarding unreasonable searches and seizures. And there's a traditional criminal standard, of course, which probable cause is something in policing and in the legal system that says you have some reason to basically investigate some person. You get a judicial warrant. Sometimes those are denied. There's a lot to it, but that's basically the traditional criminal standard. This is a different sort of process. Remember, these are not These are not criminal violations. These are, I guess you would say, misdemeanors, but it's a process crime. It's a crime that says you're not supposed to be here at all. You prove your due process, I guess, your due process rights are when you have the ability to say, here's proof that I'm legally allowed to be here. If you can't provide that, then you will be deported. You're not going to jail unless there's other crimes or you're a repeat offender, or if and in that case, the federal government would have to make decisions to pursue that. This right now, we're just talking about removing people that aren't supposed to be here. Immigration is, the removal during an immigration violation is a civil offense. Deportation is not a criminal conviction. This is where the left likes to play word games as well. They'll say it's not a crime. It is a crime, but it's not one that is a criminal where there is it's a felony or some such thing. It doesn't involve a conviction. You're not having your rights, taken away because you've broken this law. You're simply removed. It's more like a traffic violation. But to say that running a red light is against the law is not the truth. Being in this country is against the law. The consequences aren't to go through the criminal process. The consequences are to go through a civil process, which could involve one's removal, should involve one's removal from the country. So ICE often uses administrative warrants. This is some paperwork, agency paperwork, not signed by a judge. So these states, Minnesota, Illinois, are arguing that administrative warrants is not a true warrant, and it doesn't justify entry, search, seizure, those sorts of things, the way that a judicial warrant would. I've got to take a break here, my friends, really quickly. But I want to tell you, friends, if you're worried about your bad cholesterol numbers, check out Solti. Solti is an all-natural product, clinically proven to lower cholesterol. It's done this for a lot of folks, may be able to do the same for you. And you can get it at a very, very reasonable rate. It's a very reasonably priced product to begin with, but you'll save 50% when you purchase using discount code Todd. All you have to do is head on over to Soltea.com, SOLTEA, promo code Todd. That gets you 50% off your first order and free shipping. You have nothing to lose, my friends, but high, bad cholesterol numbers. I have to take a time out, though. Quick time out, my friends. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Talking about the lawsuits brought by the states of Minnesota and Illinois against the federal government, the Trump administration, because of how they are enforcing immigration law in these states. They've complained about, the lawsuit is in part about the warrants and the type of warrant that's used by ICE versus having a warrant provided by the court, an Article 3 judge. So we'll get back into that, my friends. Again, it's important, though, to note. It's important to note that there's a public-facing side of this, because the left can't come out and tell you what they really think about this. The left can't come out and tell you, we hope that immigration law is never enforced, right? When Biden was in the White House, he would tell us all the things that he wished he could do. He needed congressional support and all this sort of stuff. Didn't need any of that. We've seen that. It's obvious as the noonday sun. But they had a built-in excuse then because they weren't doing anything to stop it. He could go to the microphone and talk about all the things he was trying to do, but never succeeded in any of them. And it's remarkable how the American people, we've just collectively, I don't mean you, but just the people who buy into this nonsense, buy into the narratives, they say, wow, the guy tried. Well, how do you know he tried? This is what trying looks like, by the way, my friends, what Trump is doing. So we accepted that. They could pretend and have this masquerade. They could play this game where they tried to convince the American taxpayer, the American voter, that they were trying to do everything in their power to fix this problem or that problem, and they just couldn't quite do it. And people were sympathetic to that. And now we see what trying really looks like. This is what happens when an administration, when a president specifically, comes in and has an agenda that includes enforcing immigration law. So, more to say about that, of course, my friends. But if you're curious about Kratom or just trying to figure out who to trust, let me introduce you to Christopher's Organic Botanicals. You've heard me talk about them on this program for some time now. They're a family-run company that offers natural lab-tested kratom. They do not provide, this is important, listen, they don't provide the synthetic stuff that's given kratom a bad name. Real kratom is responsibly sourced. It's tested for purity. It's not the synthetic garbage. Christopher's does it the right way. They work directly with farmers in Indonesia. They follow the same traditions that have been trusted for generations. No gimmicks, no shortcuts. Just clean, honest kratom for people looking for an alternative that provides a natural way to support their health. You can start with their Kratom Starter Pack. It's a great way to start. Once you do your research and you're comfortable, you can use coupon code Todd Huff to save 10%. You can go to Christopher's Organic Botanicals.com to place that order or just to research. Either way, Christopher's Organic Botanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. Okay. Let's get back to it. So the warrants are a part of this. We talked about that. I don't want to get too much more into that. I'm just giving you some of the reasons, excuses, as far as I see it, for fighting ICE. One of them is another area of contention that Illinois and Minnesota have with what Trump and ICE are doing is this sensitive location argument. And they claim that it's unconstitutional when places like schools, churches, hospitals there's ever enforcement in or around those areas. Historically, these sensitive areas, they've been there's been some policy guidance as it pertains to DHS and ICE in particular. And so there might have been some rules and so forth, but there's nothing constitutionally that limits where ICE can operate, where they can go through the city. And of course, they want you to think that they're going door to door in classrooms looking for little Johnny to deport him. That's not what's happening. But you also can't have a situation where people are seeking refuge in places where it reminds me, it's not, of course, as extreme, but it reminds me of Hamas. Hamas would launch missiles from schools and hospitals into Israel, put people's lives at danger and at risk. Israel would eventually respond by, first of all, they would tell everybody they're going to strike the location, the school or the hospital. They would drop leaflets. They would ring cell phones. I mean, they did everything in their power to say, if you're around this building, get out of there. We're going to take it out because it's a site that Hamas is using to fire missiles at us. And so they would do it, and then they would strike the hospital. And then, of course, Hamas wanted the footage. Hamas wanted the narrative. Hamas wanted the images. They wanted to show the rubble of the hospital and make it look like it was some just strike on the most defenseless and most vulnerable people. So the people involved in these things know this, right? If I can get, I don't want to get detained, but if I can get detained near a hospital or near a school, then I can probably get a lot of pressure put on ICE for enforcing the law in this particular area. We certainly don't want that to be the case. I mean, we don't want people to have the ability to have safety and refuge from the law just because they're in a certain vicinity or area. At the same time, while also saying we're not raiding schools and so forth, going classroom to classroom or hospital room to hospital room looking for some vulnerable child or something. That's not what's happening here. So they have a problem with this as well. And they're saying that ICE shouldn't be enforcing the law, I guess, in these sensitive locations and areas. They've also claimed that this is political retaliation. This is a big point of their argument. Illinois and Minnesota are explicitly alleging that the federal surge in their states is meant to punish blue Democrat jurisdictions for not cooperating or, well, by having sanctuary policies. So for those of you who don't know, and I know most of you do, but some may not, sanctuary city is a city in which basically illegal immigration law is ignored. And specifically what it means is you say, hey, we're a sanctuary city. If you're someone who's here illegally, you're safe here. We're not going to come looking for you to deport you, and we're not going to cooperate with federal agents like ICE if they come looking for you in our city. In fact, there's some extreme examples of what some of these places have done. Some of these places will avoid even passing off someone who's already in their custody for something else, passing them off to ICE. They'll do everything in their power to release the person in the parking lot to avoid having to simply hand them over to ICE. ICE would have said, hey, I know you have this person. We suspect this person is here illegally. Can we do an exchange? Can we come and pick the person up? No, they won't cooperate with that. And so we've had instances where ICE has had to be in the parking lots of these places, right? Courthouses and that sort of thing, to apprehend people that they've tried to get these cities and states to go along with, and they won't because of their policies. So the argument is that this is meant to punish jurisdictions that are Democrat because they've got these sanctuary policies. May I say the obvious? The law is being enforced. The areas that we're targeting is looking at places that have illegal immigrants. And that includes, obviously, cities. That's where proportionally most are going to be, are these big blue cities, especially blue cities that protect them. So how is it retaliation to enforce the law in your city? Think about what you're saying. You're enforcing the law in our city. How about by enforcing the law, you're harming our city? Let that sink in for a moment. Then, of course, they come up with language like ICE is occupying the city. They're coercing local policy changes. They're targeting places that publicly resist ICE and DHS and so forth. And so, again, the position is here in these lawsuits, the front-facing side is, we're not telling you can't enforce immigration law. We're telling you can't do it this way. But the truth is, deep down under all of that, they don't want any of this enforced. They don't. Or they would have done it years ago, my friends. They have stood in the way of this. From sanctuary city policies to demonizing ICE to organizing protests to lying about facts to lying about what can be done on the border to telling us the border was secure under Biden. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And candidly, most Americans are still just scratching the surface regarding the depth of how bad this problem really is and how much it's been allowed to fester in our cities around this country. Time out for me. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment of today's program. Again, talking about these lawsuits that have been filed by Minnesota and Illinois pertaining to the way that ICE is operating in their cities. We've gone through that today. I've got a few more thoughts on that here in this final short. It's the shortest segment that we have. My friends, let's face it, there are a lot of companies out there that do not share your Christian values. The good news is you don't have to invest in them. At 48 Financial, they specialize in, listen to this, biblically responsible investing. They'll help screen companies out that go against your faith, your values, and they'll help create a plan that's tailored to your goals. They'll handle all the heavy lifting so you can focus on what really matters. If you want to see to what degree or even if your current investments align with your values, take a quick assessment. It's very easy to do. I did it. It's at 48financial.com/Todd. 48financial.com/Todd is where you would go for that assessment, and then they'll show you to what degree your current investments align with your values. 48 Financial, because your values matter, and friends, so does your money. All right. Now, I want to say a few things here in closing about federalism and the Constitution. When the Constitution was formed, my friends, when the founders got together and they framed the Constitution, there's this concept, this phrase called the consent of the governed. And essentially what the Constitution is an agreement of the people that has said, look, we are giving you our consent, federal government, to handle these certain things, right? Because we are a free people. We basically, and again, this is unique to America, instead of the reigning people of power, right, in the days after winning the American Revolution, instead of those folks taking the reins and saying, all right, now we're going to tell you what's up and what you can do and can't do and all that. Basically what they said was, this is your country, American citizens. And so we got to have a government. We can't have complete anarchy, but we want to have a limited government. We want to have a government that respects your personal liberty. You're going to be free in this country. And so government is force. And so we have to give the government enough power to be able to do the things that we need it to do for a civil society, but nothing more. And so you're going to give your consent. We're giving our collective consent here to say, okay, federal government, here's what you can do. And this is how you're going to be structured. There's going to be a president. He's going to have these powers. You're going to have Congress. It's going to be bicameral Congress. So there's going to be a Senate and a House of Representatives. One's going to be representing the people. The other originally represented the states. That's why these state legislatures elected senators. These folks are going to pass legislation. There's going to be a court system. It's going to make sure they're going to be the voice, so to speak, of the Constitution to make sure that the laws that are passed do not violate what this basic agreement is, this fundamental document. And so that's how it was structured. And inside of that document, there's articles, of course, for each of the branches. There's the preamble, there's the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights in the 10th Amendment basically says that anything not assigned to the responsibility, anything that the people have not explicitly given their consent to the federal government to do, it's reserved to the states and to the people. So when you look at the role of the federal government and the document itself, you know constitutionally that enforcing, say national defense, immigration, these are things that constitutionally the federal government is supposed to be doing. And there was a court case back, I've talked about this before. This goes back to 2012, Arizona versus the United States. That's when Arizona was trying to enforce immigration law because the federal government under Obama was not. They were told they couldn't do that, and that is a job of the federal government to enforce immigration law. And then, of course, Obama went back to not enforcing it, which in part led us to this disastrous place that we are today. So, this argument the left is making is, hey, ICE is coming in and it's violating our rights. It's violating the 10th Amendment. We have the right to kind of manage our own state. ICE is coming in and making a mess of this. Well, the reality is ICE is coming in and doing what they're constitutionally given the authority to do. And the left doesn't like it, again, because this is its pipeline to votes. This is its pipeline to changing America as founded by opening the floodgates so that people who come from places, again, it doesn't matter where they come from. It doesn't matter, well, it matters if it's a terrorist organization or a terrorist state or something like that, but it doesn't matter their ethnicity or color or any of those things. What matters is whether or not they respect and adhere to American principles. whether or not they would assimilate into the culture, because the left just wants to change America as founded. They hate it, as I've shared this with you many times before. They hate Western civilization. They hate Christianity. They hate God. I'm talking specifically about the godless radical left here. And these are things that are fundamentally baked in to the final product that we have here in the United States of America. And so this was their pipeline to change all that and get some votes along the way. That's why they go kicking and screaming here. This is not, it's not serious to say this is a violation of federalism. That's ridiculous, in fact. This is the federal government enforcing federal law per the Constitution wherever in this country those laws are being violated. They happen to be in blue states because they're led by people who want lawlessness, my friends. And I gotta go. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening, my friends. SDG.